You know that feeling when you hold an acceptance letter from your dream school and everything you have worked for suddenly feels within reach. I remember staring at that Wharton MBA acceptance letter, thinking about the $120,000 sitting safely in my trust fund that Uncle Jake had helped me set up years ago. After grinding through 80-hour weeks as a consultant, saving every penny from internships and side jobs since college, I finally had my shot. I thought my parents would be proud, especially after years of watching my younger sister Brooke get all the attention as the family golden child. But I never imagined that the people I trusted most would be the ones to destroy everything I had built. Before I share what my own parents did to sabotage my future, I want to connect with you wherever you are right now. Are you listening from your bedroom, maybe planning your own dreams that your family does not quite understand? Hit that like button if you have ever felt like the overlooked child in your family, and make sure to subscribe, because this story proves that sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. Uncle Jake always told me that blood does not guarantee loyalty, but loyalty deserves protection. What happened next tested every family bond I thought was unbreakable and showed me that sometimes the people who should celebrate our success are the ones who try to steal it away. Let me tell you how my own parents almost destroyed my future and how Uncle Jake made sure they paid for every stolen dollar. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before this nightmare began. At 29, I was a senior consultant in Boston, the kind of person who had been responsible since childhood. While other kids were playing video games, I was working part-time jobs from age 16, methodically building my college fund, dollar by dollar. My parents, David and Susan, were solid middle-class people. Dad worked as an engineer, Mom taught elementary school, and we lived comfortably, but never extravagantly. But here is where things get complicated. I had always been the reliable daughter, the one with straight-A grades and sensible goals, while my sister Brooke was 3 years younger and everything I was not. Brooke was gorgeous, charming, and had this magnetic personality that drew people in like moths to a flame. She worked sporadically as an influencer, which really meant she took pretty pictures and hoped brands would pay her for them. Growing up, the differences in how we were treated became impossible to ignore. When Brooke wanted elaborate birthday parties with pony rides and professional photographers, my parents found the money. When I asked for extra tutoring to boost my SAT scores, they suggested I study harder on my own. Brooke dropped out of college twice, and each time my parents called it a learning experience and helped her find her path. When I struggled with one particularly difficult semester, they told me they were disappointed in my lack of focus. The pattern continued into our adult lives. Last year, Brooke crashed my parents' car while texting and driving. Instead of making her pay for repairs, they bought her a brand new Honda Civic. Meanwhile, I was still making payments on my own vehicle and handling my student loans without any family assistance. During family dinners, conversations revolved around Brooke's latest drama or her newest Instagram post that got 1,000 likes. When I received a promotion at work, the response was a polite, "That is nice, dear," before the topic shifted back to Brooke's adventures. Uncle Jake, my father's older brother, was the only family member who seemed to see what was happening. As a successful businessman who had built his company from nothing, he understood the value of hard work and delayed gratification. He would pull me aside at family gatherings and quietly tell me, "Kate, your parents are blind to real achievement. Do not let their favoritism make you doubt your worth." When I decided to pursue my MBA, Uncle Jake was the one who helped me set up a trust fund to protect my savings. We made it ironclad with legal protections that required my signature for any withdrawals. Over the years, I had accumulated exactly $120,000 through careful budgeting, weekend consulting gigs, and living well below my means, while my peers were buying expensive apartments and designer clothes. The day my Wharton acceptance arrived, I felt like I was finally ahead for once in my life. I had something that Brooke could not touch, something that was purely mine. The partial scholarship I had earned would cover about 40% of the tuition, and my savings would handle the rest, plus living expenses. Uncle Jake took me out for a celebration dinner that night, beaming with pride about my achievement and my careful planning. My parents' response was lukewarm at best. They congratulated me, but their enthusiasm felt forced, like they were checking off a box on some social obligation list. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, I had learned long ago not to expect the same level of excitement they reserved for Brooke's accomplishments. But then Brooke announced her engagement to Ryan, an unemployed musician with big dreams and no steady income. Suddenly, my parents were energized in a way I had not seen since Brooke's high school graduation. They immediately launched into wedding planning mode, discussing venues and guest lists and dress shopping with the kind of enthusiasm that had been missing from my MBA celebration. That was when I started noticing the whispered conversations that stopped whenever I entered the room. My parents would be talking in low voices at the kitchen table, but the moment they heard my footsteps, they would switch to discussing the weather or asking about my work. Brooke began making casual comments about family investments and shared resources topics that had never come up before. The pressure started small, like water dripping through a tiny crack that eventually floods your entire house. Brooke's engagement party became this elaborate $15,000 affair that somehow I was expected to contribute to as the supportive big sister. When I hesitated, my mother sat me down for one of those conversations that starts with, "We need to talk about family priorities." Sisters support each other. She said, her tone carrying that particular blend of guilt and expectation that mothers perfect over decades. "Your father and I have always tried to treat you girls equally, but that means sometimes you help each other out. I ended up contributing $2,000 that I could barely afford, watching my parents beam with pride as Brooke showed off her engagement ring to relatives who oohed and awed appropriately. The wedding budget kept climbing. What started as a simple ceremony somehow ballooned into an $80,000 extravaganza with a country club venue, a string quartet, and a photographer whose portfolio looked like it belonged in a magazine. My parents discussed these expenses casually over dinner, as if the money was materializing from thin air. Meanwhile, my MBA start date was approaching, and my parents seemed increasingly distant whenever I brought up my plans. They would nod and make appropriate sounds, but I could feel their attention drifting. When I tried to include them in my excitement about course selections or housing options near campus, they would redirect the conversation back to wedding planning. "Maybe you could defer for a year," my mother suggested one evening while we were addressing wedding invitations. "Give Brooke time to get settled. Help us with the transition. Education can wait, but these family milestones only happen once." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The way she said it, so casual and reasonable, made me question whether I was being selfish for not wanting to put my life on hold for my sister's wedding. But Uncle Jake had taught me to trust my instincts, and every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. The wedding planning consumed every family gathering. Venue deposits, dress fittings, catering tastings, flower arrangements. I was excluded from the major decision-making, but expected to contribute financially and emotionally to each milestone. Brooke's sense of entitlement grew with each week her expectations expanding like a balloon that no one was willing to pop. "Kate makes good money," I overheard her telling our mother one afternoon. "She can help with the honeymoon expenses too. It is not like she has any major expenses coming up." The fact that my MBA tuition was due in 3 months seemed to have been completely forgotten by everyone except me. Then Brooke and Ryan started house hunting for after the wedding. They were looking at properties in the $400,000 range, discussing down payments and mortgage rates with the confidence of people who had never worried about money a day in their lives. When I asked how they planned to finance a house with Ryan's inconsistent income and Brooke's sporadic influencer earnings, I was told not to worry about details that did not concern me. But the details did concern me, especially when my parents started displaying this mysterious confidence about being able to help with the down payment. They talked about the house hunting process like it was already a done deal, discussing neighborhoods and school districts with the casual certainty of people who had the financing already arranged. Uncle Jake noticed the changes too. During one of our monthly coffee meetings, he asked me directly if anything seemed off about my parents' behavior. I told him about the whispered conversations and the growing pressure to contribute to Brooke's various expenses, and I watched his expression darken. "Kate," he said carefully, "when was the last time you checked your trust fund balance?" I assured him that everything was fine, that the account required my signature for any withdrawals, but he insisted we schedule a meeting with the bank just to be safe. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. The house hunting reached its climax when Brooke found what she called her perfect forever home, a $450,000 colonial with updated kitchen hardwood floors and enough space for the children she and Ryan planned to have someday. The down payment requirement was $90,000, a sum that should have been impossible for a couple with their financial situation. But my parents were not concerned. In fact, they seemed excited discussing the house like it was already in the family. When I asked directly how Brooke and Ryan planned to come up with $90,000, my father just smiled and said they were exploring family investment opportunities. The phrase made my skin crawl, though I could not articulate why. Around this time, I discovered that my parents had been meeting with the family lawyer without mentioning it to me. I only found out because I ran into him at the grocery store, and he made a casual comment about the trust fund paperwork they had been reviewing. When I asked what paperwork he was referring to, his face went pale, and he quickly excused himself. That night, I confronted my parents about the lawyer meeting. They claimed it was just routine family financial planning, nothing that concerned me directly. But when I pressed for details, my father's voice took on an edge I had never heard before. "Why are you so suspicious of your own family, Kate?" he demanded. "We have always looked out for your best interests. Maybe you should trust us to continue doing that." The trust fund statements I received in the mail still showed the full balance, so I tried to push down my growing anxiety. But Uncle Jake had planted a seed of doubt that kept growing. He started making his own inquiries, using his business connections to verify the security of the trust arrangements he had helped me establish. Meanwhile, the financial requests from my family were escalating. After the engagement party contribution, there were requests for wedding shower expenses, bridesmaids' dress costs for a wedding party I was not even part of, and various other celebration fees that seemed to multiply like weeds. Each time I hesitated, I was reminded about family loyalty and the importance of supporting each other during major life events. The breaking point came when I overheard my parents discussing something they called educational fund reallocation. They were researching legal ways to redirect money from education savings toward family home purchases talking about it in the same casual tone they used to discuss dinner plans. When they noticed I was listening, the conversation stopped abruptly, and they both looked at me with expressions I had never seen before, guilt mixed with defiance. That was when I realized that my trust fund might not be as secure as I had believed. I called Uncle Jake immediately, and the urgency in his voice when he answered told me that his own investigation had uncovered something serious. We scheduled an emergency meeting with the bank for the following Monday. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. I found myself double-checking every lock in my apartment, jumping at every phone notification, feeling like I was waiting for some terrible shoe to drop. And when Monday morning arrived, it dropped harder than I could have ever imagined. The bank meeting with Uncle Jake started with routine verification questions, but within minutes, our world exploded. The trust fund balance, which should have shown $120,000 and change displayed $847.32. I stared at the computer screen, certain there had been some mistake. There must be an error. I told the bank representative, my voice barely above a whisper. This account has legal protections. No one can withdraw funds without my written authorization. That was when she showed us the withdrawal authorizations. 3 separate forms, each bearing what appeared to be my signature authorizing transfers, totaling $119,000. The handwriting looked exactly like mine. The signatures were perfect forgeries. Uncle Jake demanded to see the full transaction history, and the pattern became clear immediately. The withdrawals had occurred over the past 3 months, each one timed perfectly to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. The money had been transferred to an account belonging to Brooke Elizabeth Morrison, my sister. I remember the physical sensation of my world collapsing. Nausea hit me first, followed by a dizziness that made me grip the edge of the conference table. Then came the rage, pure and burning, and unlike anything I had ever experienced. My own parents had forged my signature to steal my life savings. Uncle Jake's reaction was terrifying in its controlled fury. I had never seen him angry before, but watching him review those bank documents, I understood why he had been so successful in business. His voice was ice cold when he spoke to the bank representative about the legal implications of identity theft and financial fraud. "This is felony theft," he said quietly, "and we are going to pursue every available legal remedy." The drive to my parents' house felt like a funeral procession. My MBA program was supposed to start in 2 weeks, and I had exactly $800 to my name. 13 years of careful saving, of working extra jobs and skipping vacations and living below my means had been stolen by the people who were supposed to love and protect me. When we walked through the front door with Uncle Jake carrying a folder full of bank statements, my parents' faces went through a progression of emotions that would have been fascinating if it were not so devastating. Surprise first, then guilt, then a hardening into defensiveness that told me they had been prepared for this confrontation. "We can explain," my mother started, but Uncle Jake cut her off. "Explain how you forged your daughter's signature to steal her graduate school fund." His voice carried the weight of absolute moral authority. "Explain how you violated a legal trust that I helped establish specifically to protect her interests." Brooke emerged from the kitchen, and her shock seemed genuine. "What are you talking about?" she asked, looking between our faces with growing alarm. "I thought you guys had permission to help with the house down payment." The confession came in pieces, each revelation more devastating than the last. My parents had been drowning in debt for months, credit card bills, a second mortgage they had hidden from everyone, medical expenses from my father's minor surgery that their insurance had not covered. They had borrowed against their retirement accounts, and maxed out every credit line available to them. When Brooke decided she needed a house, they saw my trust fund as the solution to all their problems. They convinced themselves that family money should be flexible, that my education could be postponed, that I would understand once I saw how happy the house made Brooke. "It is all family money anyway," my father said, his voice defensive. "We were going to pay it back once our finances stabilized." The house contract had already been signed. Brooke and Ryan were scheduled to close in 2 weeks, using my stolen money as the down payment. The wedding expenses had been partially funded by my savings as well. Money I had earned working late nights and weekends had paid for flowers and photographers and a venue that I would not even attend. That night, I moved out of my childhood home and into Uncle Jake's guest room. My parents' final words to me were about destroying family relationships and being ungrateful for everything they had sacrificed for me. Brooke tried to call several times, but I was not ready to hear her explanations or apologies. Uncle Jake spent that evening making phone calls to his attorney and his accountant. By morning, he had assembled a legal team that specialized in financial fraud cases. The strategy was simple: full restitution or criminal prosecution. No negotiations, no family meetings, no appeals to blood relations. "They think you are weak because you have always been the responsible one," he told me over coffee the next morning. Time to show them that responsibility includes standing up for yourself. The legal pressure hit my family like a financial tsunami. Within 48 hours, Uncle Jake's attorney had filed freeze orders on my parents' assets and initiated the paperwork for criminal fraud charges. Cease and desist letters went to both my parents and Brooke, legally prohibiting the use of any funds connected to my stolen money. The house purchase collapsed immediately. When the sellers realized that the down payment was tied up in a criminal investigation, they backed out of the contract and kept the earnest money deposit. Brooke's dream house disappeared overnight, along with all the future plans she had built around it. My parents tried to negotiate, offering to pay back the money in installments over several years. Uncle Jake's response was brutally simple. They had stolen money earmarked for education that had to start immediately. Installment plans were not acceptable when the victim needed the funds restored within weeks. The criminal investigation revealed the full scope of their financial deception. The forensic accountant Uncle Jake hired discovered that my parents had been living beyond their means for years, using credit and loans to maintain a lifestyle they could not afford. My father's engineering salary and my mother's teaching income had been supplemented by debt for so long that they had lost track of reality. The wedding planning came to a screeching halt as the financial chaos unfolded. Deposits that had been paid using my stolen money were now part of the criminal investigation. Vendors started demanding additional payments, and my parents had no legitimate funds to cover the shortfalls. Brooke's relationship with Ryan began to strain under the pressure. He had quit his part-time job, anticipating the stability of home ownership, and now they were facing the prospect of starting over with nothing. The social media presence that formed the basis of Brooke's income started to suffer as her content shifted from aspirational lifestyle posts to stressed updates about family drama. My parents made one desperate attempt to turn the family against me, calling relatives to complain about my ungrateful behavior and legal threats. But Uncle Jake had done his homework. He provided the bank statements and legal documents to key family members, letting the facts speak for themselves. The response was swift and devastating universal condemnation of my parents' actions. The pressure campaign worked exactly as Uncle Jake had planned. Faced with criminal charges, asset seizure, and the prospect of bankruptcy, my parents finally agreed to full restitution. They were forced to sell their house, liquidate their retirement accounts, and take out loans against my father's pension to restore every penny they had stolen. But Uncle Jake was not finished. He demanded additional compensation for the interest my money would have earned, legal fees for the recovery process, and emotional damages for the trauma of being betrayed by my own family. The total bill came to $137,000, $17,000 more than they had originally stolen. Watching my parents sign the paperwork was one of the most complicated emotional experiences of my life. Part of me felt vindicated, finally seeing consequences for their favoritism and manipulation. But another part of me grieved for the family relationships that had been permanently damaged by their choices. The money was restored to my account exactly 2 weeks before my MBA program started. I was able to begin my studies on schedule, but the emotional scars of the betrayal took much longer to heal. I spent my first semester at Wharton feeling like I was walking through a strange dream. Everything I had worked for was back on track, but the foundation of trust I had built my life on had been completely destroyed. My parents had shown me that they were willing to sacrifice my future for my sister's comfort, and that knowledge changed how I saw every family relationship. Uncle Jake became more than an ally during this period. He became the father figure I had needed all along. His business wisdom and moral clarity helped me navigate both the legal complexities and the emotional aftermath of the theft. He reminded me constantly that seeking justice was not the same as seeking revenge, and that protecting myself was not selfish. The academic challenges of business school actually provided a welcome distraction from the family drama. I threw myself into case studies and group projects, finding relief in problems that had clear solutions and logical outcomes. My classmates came from all over the world, and their perspectives on family and success helped me realize how dysfunctional my family dynamics had always been. As my first year progressed, I started to rebuild my confidence and sense of self-worth. The theft had actually clarified something important. I did not need my parents' approval to succeed. Their validation had always been conditional and unreliable anyway. Meanwhile, my family was learning to live with the consequences of their choices. My parents' bankruptcy filing became public record, affecting my father's security clearance at work and my mother's standing in the school district where she taught. They were forced to move into a small rental house and rebuild their financial lives from scratch. Brooke struggled the most with the aftermath. Her engagement to Ryan ended when he realized that her family support system was built on fraud and manipulation rather than genuine stability. Her social media following dropped as her content became less aspirational and more desperate. She eventually found work in retail, earning barely enough to cover her basic expenses. The family tried to initiate contact several times during my first year at business school, but I was not ready to engage. Uncle Jake advised me to wait until I felt emotionally strong enough to set clear boundaries without being manipulated back into old patterns. That opportunity came near the end of my second year when my parents reached out through a family friend to ask if we could meet. They claimed they had learned from their mistakes and wanted to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty and respect. I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a coffee shop near campus where I felt safe and in control. Uncle Jake offered to accompany me, but I decided this was something I needed to handle alone. Seeing my parents after 2 years was jarring. They looked older, more worn down by the financial and social consequences of their actions. My mother had gray hair, she had stopped coloring, and my father seemed to have aged a decade in 24 months. Their apology was more genuine than I had expected, but it was also full of justifications and attempts to minimize their responsibility. They talked about the stress they had been under, the pressure of trying to help both their daughters, the way financial problems had clouded their judgment. I listened carefully, but I also held firm to the boundaries Uncle Jake had helped me establish. I told them that any future relationship would require complete financial independence, total honesty about money matters, and respect for my decisions without guilt or manipulation. "I love you both," I said as our meeting ended, "but I will never again put myself in a position where you can steal from me or lie to me. Trust is earned, and you have a lot of work to do." The conversation with Brooke was even more complicated. She had been working in retail for over a year, living in a small apartment, and learning to budget in ways she had never had to before. The experience had changed her. She was more humble, more aware of financial realities, less entitled than she had been during the height of her influencer period. She apologized for her part in the disaster, acknowledging that her demands and expectations had put pressure on our parents to find money they did not have. She did not try to excuse their theft, but she helped me understand the family dynamics that had led to it. "I always knew I was the favorite," she admitted during one of our careful conversations. "But I thought that meant they loved me more, not that they loved you less. I never wanted them to steal from you to give to me." Rebuilding a relationship with Brooke became a slow process of establishing new patterns of interaction. We started with short phone calls every few weeks, carefully avoiding topics that might trigger old resentments. Gradually, we began to find common ground as adults who had both been shaped by dysfunctional family patterns. My MBA graduation was a triumphant moment, made sweeter by Uncle Jake's presence in the audience. He had been the steady support that allowed me to complete my education, despite the family chaos. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about how different my life might have been if he had not helped me fight for what was rightfully mine. The job offers started coming in during my final semester, and I ultimately accepted a position with a tech strategy firm in San Francisco. The salary was more than I had dreamed of when I first started planning for business school, and the signing bonus alone was enough to build a comfortable emergency fund. Moving across the country felt like the final step in establishing my independence from family dysfunction. I bought my own condo, furnished it exactly to my taste, and created a life that reflected my values rather than my family's expectations. Uncle Jake visited me in San Francisco 6 months after I started my new job, and we celebrated what he called my complete victory over the people who had tried to steal my future. But I had learned that victory was not just about getting my money back. It was about refusing to let other people's failures define my possibilities. Now, 5 years later, I can look back on the theft as a painful but necessary lesson about the difference between family loyalty and family enabling. My parents had taught me that love without respect is not really love, and that protecting yourself is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. My career has exceeded every goal I set during business school. I was promoted to senior manager within 3 years, and I am currently being considered for a vice president role. The financial independence I fought so hard to achieve has given me the freedom to make choices based on my values rather than my fears. I still have limited contact with my parents, but our relationship is now based on mutual respect rather than guilt and obligation. They understand that I will not tolerate financial manipulation or emotional blackmail, and they have largely respected those boundaries. Brooke and I have developed a genuine friendship for the first time in our lives. she eventually went back to school to study accounting inspired, partly by seeing how financial literacy had protected me during our family crisis. We talk regularly now, and she often asks for advice about budgeting and career planning. But the most important thing I learned from this experience is that sometimes protecting your dreams means protecting them from the people you love most. Family relationships should enhance your life, not diminish it. And when the people who raised you try to steal your future, fighting back is not selfish. It is essential. Uncle Jake was right when he told me that blood does not guarantee loyalty, but loyalty deserves protection. Sometimes you have to choose between being a good daughter and being good to yourself, and choosing yourself is not always the wrong answer. As I finish telling you this story, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting your own future? Maybe you are dealing with relatives who expect you to sacrifice your dreams for their comfort, or parents who think your success should be shared with siblings who have not earned it. Drop a comment below and tell me about your experience with family financial drama. Have you ever had to set boundaries with relatives who thought they were entitled to your money or your opportunities? I read every comment, and your stories help other people realize they are not alone in these struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we need permission to stand up for ourselves, and knowing that other people have fought similar battles can give us the courage to protect what we have worked for. Make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because I share stories like this every week. Real experiences from real people who have learned that sometimes the most difficult but necessary word you can say to family is no. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your dreams matter just as much as anyone else's. Never let guilt or family pressure convince you to give up what you have worked for. You deserve to reap the benefits of your own hard work, and anyone who tries to take that away from you is not acting in your best interests, no matter what they claim. Stay strong, set your boundaries, and never apologize for protecting your future. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember that you are worth fighting for.